So welcome back to the Holler. tnholler.com is where you can find us at the TN Holler on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all that good stuff. We also have Hollers hollering all across the state. Thanks to your support. We appreciate it. Chip in a few bucks a month. Get one of these sweet Holler hats like the one I'm wearing. And if you need a home in Middle Tennessee, do it through Elisa Parker. And if you need a lawyer, Abby Rubenfeld is a rock star. Today, we're talking to somebody who I have been fascinated by, grateful for the opportunity to talk to him, GEOFF Duncan. He was Lieutenant Governor of Georgia as a Republican, and now he is running for governor of Georgia as a Democrat. Jeff, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How about you?
I was hoping we could kind of start from the beginning. Once upon a time, you were Lieutenant Governor of Republican. How did that happen?
Grew up in a Republican household. I live in Forsyth County, a Republican county. Got elected as a state representative as a Republican. Really found out early and often that, this bipartisan thing actually works. Quality of legislation makes sense. So I wanted to test drive this new theory of putting this different type of leadership on display. And I won to become Georgia's lieutenant governor. For 4 years, was not this hyper-partisan guy. I built consensus. I was nothing to find me in a Democratic caucus meeting before the session, started working on compromises, passed hate crimes legislation together, traveled the pandemic together, and it worked to work across the aisle. So for me, I started seeing this breakaway from me and this angry, vile groundswell of the MAGA movement, and it just created separation between me and my operating style.
What made you a Republican at the time?
Yeah, I think my core values were really centered around just being a fiscal conservative. I think that's what drove me in. The tail end of the Tea Party movement that came in, it was really just kind of focused on fiscal issues of trying to use the least amount of resources to solve the most amount of problems. And for the most part, we do a really good job of doing that in Georgia in a bipartisan way, by the way. I think a majority of Democrats that are elected are fiscal conservatives also. I think we're really good stewards of the taxpayers' money in Georgia, and that's not really a Republican or Democrat thing. I think what started to gnaw at me was some of the approach, and Donald Trump was like jet fuel on this fire of the social issues and the way we communicate and the way we try to build consensus. He was just anti-consensus. The pandemic, the civil unrest, the 10% unemployment, and then the 2020 election steal. I mean, that was just a non-starter for me. I was talking to all the elections officials. I was talking to all the investigators, attorney general, everybody. And there was no fraud. There was no smoking gun. Donald Trump was just willing to lie about it. And for me, it was a big deal because I felt like he was usurping democracy. I thought if I got out quick enough in front of him and just said, no, sorry, there's no conspiracy theories here, I could get out in front of it and tamp it down. Obviously, I was wrong. So I didn't run again for a number of reasons, but I just no longer found a home in the Republican Party.
Were you surprised that more Republicans didn't join you in that effort to protect the election?
I'm surprised every minute of every day. And to make matters even worse, what's surprising is the number of Republicans that go up and they put their arm around you and they look both ways and they lean over and they whisper just loud enough for just you to hear and say, hey, man, I really appreciate you doing the right thing. I wish I could do it. I wish my district was more supportive. I wish the time was different. I wish Donald Trump would go away. Whatever their little excuse structure is. But, it is what it is. I got two choices. I can either get mad at them or I can lead by example. And I've chosen to lead by example. And for me, part of that move is becoming a Democrat and looking up to stay focused on the issues that matter most. Both political parties feel like they were broken during this last cycle. It should have been much easier to beat Donald Trump at the time. And unfortunately, I think those folks that determined the election in the middle and some of those disgruntled Republicans that did end up voting for Donald Trump are now watching the regret play out with tariffs showing up, with the inhumane ICE raids, embarrassing display of foreign policy with these wars. He's not a peacemaker. He's a chaos maker. I'm watching this play out over and over in our own homes and watching inflation still climb, right? Nothing's cheaper in my life. All of that together, you put that in a big bowl of soup. That was the real catalyst for me. It was like, you know what? I know on paper this isn't a historically popular play, but I think the moment in time is that somebody who's going to stay laser focused on the issues that matter. Because at the end of the day, I think folks in America, especially in Georgia, have three crises going on all at the same time. An affordability crisis, a healthcare crisis, and a Donald Trump crisis. And I'm focused on those three issues. I'm not going to take the bait of trying to call people names and throw cheap punches at people. I'm just going to stay laser focused. If I'm wrong and that's not what Georgians want to focus on, then I'll lose the election and I'll move on. But based upon my conversations leading up to announcing, and just in the first week, I think people are hungry for somebody who just can stay focused on the issues.
I've always felt that conversion stories are really powerful because they kind of serve as a bridge for others. And so, this conversion story of yours going from Republican to Democrat, I'm wondering if others are joining you in that. Is it providing a bridge, or are you looking back going, nobody's coming?
No, they're coming in droves. And I think there's another element to this to me. My driving motivation for being in office is to figure out ways to love my neighbor. We all get to do that in every facet of life. And that became so hard as a Republican. My personal story, it just became hard, right? There was asterisk marks on everything. And so for me, becoming a Democrat gives me a better opportunity in my personal life to be able to navigate that. I think folks are flocking to that type of mentality. It may not be a perfect policy fit for them, but this notion of being able to agree to disagree on a handful of issues is inviting. I also think that the tone and tenor that we use is huge. We don't talk to people this way in our homes. If we did, we wouldn't stay married. At least I wouldn't. We don't talk to people this way when we go to work, or else we'd get fired or people would quit. We don't talk this way in our churches or on our baseball fields. But for some reason, because the handful of people that are in charge have made it okay to talk this way in politics, it's not right. And I think we got to lead by example.
Jeff, a lot of what we hear is that Democrats, if you don't fall in line with Democrats on everything, litmus test, then there's no room for you in the party. You seem like a living, breathing example that actually the reverse is true, that it's Republicans who kicked you out of the party for not towing the line with Trump. And now you're saying you have found a home in the Democratic Party where you may not agree with everybody on everything, but you can agree to disagree and still have a home there.
Democrats have been so welcoming from top to bottom, even from the moment I spoke at the DNC in front of tens of thousands of people in the United Center. The hugs, the conversations, the follow-up calls, the text messages, I mean, just priceless. And the millions of people watching at home. The campaign trail with Kamala Harris, her team couldn't have been any better. Her supporters couldn't have been any more inviting. And now I've announced for governor, and I'm feeling the same thing. I'm going all across the state. I think multiple things are happening. One, this environment of agreeing to disagree, but also this notion of we can move our feet. I've moved my feet on a couple of really important issues. One is guns. The NRA does not have the best interest of Georgians in mind, or Americans in general. I find myself as a father of three that really truly believes that 90% of Americans know what they're talking about with universal background checks and red flag laws. I'm in that camp. And I have to say, I got it wrong. Abortion's another issue. I got it wrong because I thought a room full of legislators knew better than millions of women, and that's wrong. So that's on me. And so as governor, I've walked into every room and said, I promise two things. I'll sign an executive order day one in Georgia that clarifies that doctors can practice medicine with pregnant women without the fear of prosecution. And two, we'll introduce legislation to repeal the 6-week ban because that's what millions of women want. And that's what they deserve, irregardless of anybody's personal opinions, mine, yours, anybody else's.
Here in Tennessee, I should say it's zero. We don't have any abortion, no exceptions for rape, life of the mother, anything like that. So it's sort of refreshing to hear that. Somebody said, have you lost your mind leaving the Republican Party? You said, if I lost my mind, I found a heart. Kind of the bulwark for Republicans is their faith. What would you say to Republicans? You can't be a Democrat and be a Christian.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll oftentimes walk into rooms, Republican rooms, and say, hey, you know what? I heard this rumor that there's going to be just as many Democrats in heaven as Republicans. And you should see like their jaws drop. Like, what do you mean? It's like, no, that's true. Faith is about what you do, not what you say. I think anybody that matured in their faith realizes that. It's about your reactions. It's not about the number of verses that you can quote. And certainly there's folks on both sides of the aisle that embrace their faith in a genuine and authentic way. And for me, this journey has been about loving my neighbor. And that's about not my neighbor, that's about me. That's about understanding the importance of building consensus, understanding perspective, gaining empathy. Those are personal challenges that just make us better. And if we're ever going to solve this toxicity problem that we have in politics, it's going to be through this notion of loving our neighbor, whether you got there through your faith or you just got there from being a good person, whatever. I got to tell you, it's really been a warm reception from Democrats up and down the list.
When you look at your old party, it seems like it's become sort of a cult of personality. Do you think that this is just a Trump thing? If he's ever gone, the fever breaks and they snap back to where you once were? Or are we adjusting to a new reality where they have changed forever?
Yeah, I'm in the latter camp. I just feel like the Republican Party, as a meaningful, heartfelt, community-focused political group, that ship has sailed. Donald Trump has sucked the life and focus and direction out of that party, and people are okay with it. They're okay with calling people names. They're okay with demeaning people. They're okay with no moral compass for their leaders. And that's unfortunate. But look, we wouldn't go to work for a company if it was run the way the Republican Party's run. We shouldn't hand the keys of our country over. That's what's so interesting about this race in Georgia is, look, there's going to be some Democrats who are like, look, this Duncan dude has not been a Democrat his entire life, and they're going to have a problem with that. That's okay. I understand that. I respect their position. But the reality is, if they don't elect me in this Democratic primary, I've got the absolute best chance to beat Donald Trump's hand-picked nominee, Burt Jones. Because day one, Burt Jones is going to take the keys to the state capitol and hand them to Donald Trump. All right, Donald, go run your evil laboratory on our schools and our streets and our budget and our agencies. I'm hopeful that a majority of Georgians don't think that's a good idea, because I really don't think they're going to think it's a good idea.
So on that note, you mentioned that January 6th and his attack on democracy catalyzed this change for you. How worried are you about the vulnerability of our elections in Georgia?
Yeah, I'm very confident in Georgia's election process and systems. I think Georgia's been pressure tested more than any other state in the country as far as outcomes. We've been audited, re-audited, double audited, triple audited. This is going to be about turnout, and this is going to be about the folks in the middle deciding, all right, do we want to hand the keys back to Donald Trump again and let him continue to embarrass us, or do we want to hand the keys to bold leadership style that actually embraces what makes sense in their day-to-day lives?
Just to push back on you a little bit, a lot of what saved us last time was Republicans in key positions doing the right thing. And it feels like a lot of those Republicans have been run off. I mean, you're an example of that.
Yeah.
Is it the same people? Is it people that you think are trustworthy? You don't think like MAGA loyalists have taken over all the key positions and they're ready and waiting to do whatever he asks?
Well, I think Governor Kemp showed a strong hand last election cycle, and I think he would stand behind the election results. There has been, to your point, some serious efforts made by the election board to circumvent some of the rules and regulations that we've had to use the courts to push back on some of those. Burt Jones is the sitting lieutenant governor as opposed to I was the lieutenant governor at the time. I do understand what the point you're making, but as far as the structure of the machines, the systems, processes, I have confidence in it. But yeah, I mean, look, if me and Governor Kemp decided to stand up and hold a press conference at any point post-2020 election and say, you know what, actually, we have a little bit of doubt in this just because we took Donald Trump's phone call or we fell for his bully tactics, we would have changed the trajectory of not only the election in Georgia, but probably the country. And that would have been a massive hit to democracy nationwide, to the world. But we didn't. I'm glad Georgia elected the right people at the right moment. And we stood up to it and we pushed back and we called out the fake electors when they were trying to usurp democracy. And we were willing to speak bold, take hateful messaging from Donald Trump. Our family received death threats just because we were willing to say the election wasn't. Yeah, absolutely. It does come down to individuals speaking up. But as far as the systems are in place, and I do believe Governor Kemp would continue to stand strong.
I talked to Republicans. One of the things that we are aligned on, I thought, was being against corruption. And yet here we are with like the most corrupt guy that ever walked the planet in the presidency. We just saw this story about Homan taking a bag of cash. Do you think Republicans are seeing this and not caring? Are they not seeing it? How are they excusing all of this corruption in their minds?
I do think it's a serious issue because it's hard to refute some of this. The crypto stuff with the Trump family, to your point, some of the members of the administration, it is troubling. And you just have to imagine that it's continuing to knock at the average American's confidence in what they're seeing play out. But look, I would have thought folks would have grown tired of it years ago when he first got beat. Unfortunately, they gave him another bite at the apple. And he's continuing to show his prowess to do anything and enrich himself. If somebody's in the MAGA world, I wish them the best. I hope they make great decisions. I hope they have a happy, prosperous life. But politically speaking, I really don't have anything for them. They're just not going to see it until they feel a different style of leadership. It's those persuadable Republicans that wake up that are just in awe at the irrational tariff policies, at the inhumane treatment of folks that are here as undocumented workers that are really embedded in our economy, in our communities in a safe, law-abiding way. Those folks, I think, are persuadable enough, and they're going to determine who's the governor, the next governor of Georgia. Is John Ossoff going to stay in place as our U.S. senator? And they're going to continue to be important players. But those folks have got to show up and be willing to cast those votes.
Just as a last thing, and then I'll let you go here. I interviewed Governor Newsom not too long ago, and what I said to him then was that—
You're name dropping now.
I am. And what I said to him was, the alarmists have yet to be wrong. That's kind of how I feel. I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked him. How far along this path to fascism and authoritarianism do you think we are? How loud is the alarm ringing in your mind?
The biggest, loudest warning sign for me is the number of cases in our judicial system right now, state, federal cases. Almost every move by the Trump administration is being legitimately challenged. And I don't know what the score sheet looks like. An overwhelming majority of those cases are being pushed back or refuted by the judicial system, by judges and judges panels. That's scary. They are pushing up against the edges of the democracy envelope every minute of every day. I think you have to look no further than some of these plays around the FMOC board, Lisa Cook and others trying to remove these folks. We're having to get Supreme Court to weigh in radically timed sequences just to keep the trains on time for our economy, for our communities, for our states, for our budgeting. I think one of the most egregious things that history is going to look back at, amongst others, maybe not the most, but equal to, is this Doge thing. I mean, Doge was the biggest disaster, blew up on the launch pad, pun intended, that had no merit and is going to end up costing America billions, if not trillions of dollars to recover from the sinkhole that he put us in. And that was because Donald Trump just threw candy out to the crowd and promised everyone tax cuts and then only cut the taxes and didn't cut spending.
Jeff, thanks for being on here, man. I've been fascinated with you speaking out, even back around the insurrection. When I heard that you were running as a Democrat, that certainly piqued my interest. This story is really an important one, and I do think nominate you would send a really powerful message. So it's commendable that you've had this change of heart. I'm interested to see how you're embracing
Yeah, I
it.
appreciate the opportunity. And look, getting our message out is what matters the most, and letting folks hear my heart. This is a true conversion story. DuncanForGeorgia.com is our website. We got lots of information, ways to connect to the campaign. We're going to work hard, and if nominated as a Democrat, we will beat the Republican handpicked nominee of Donald Trump and be the next governor of Georgia.